everybody. My name is Eric and I'm here with you to talk about visa places for the next financial year, starting on the 1st of July 2022 and going all the way to June 2023. If you're not in Australia and you may not be familiar with the financial year here in Australia, the financial year starts on the 1st of July and finishes on the 30th of June of the next year. So at the moment we're on the financial year 2021-2022 and it's finishing on the 30th of June very soon. So every May, depending on what's happening with the government, every May the government announces the financial budget, which is the financial planning for the nation in terms of what is going to be spent and what's going to be earned and where money is coming from and all of that. This year, the budget was announced in March because this is an election year here in Australia. So we got the budget announcement a bit earlier. In 2020, we got the budget announcement much later than usual. Instead of May, we got that in October because of the pandemic. No one really knew what the pandemic was going to turn into, so the government decided to release those numbers later on, which was a good decision in our opinion. But this year we got it early because there's going to be an election next month. So this current government wanted to make sure their numbers and their financial planning got out before the election. So why am I talking about budget and financial planning if we're here today to talk about visa numbers? The reason I'm doing that is because when the budget is announced, that's when we also learn how many permanent visas will be allocated to be granted in that financial year. So think about permanent visas in Australia. When you get a permanent visa in Australia, you are eligible to enroll with Medicare. You are able to access certain government benefits. Therefore, there's a cost for that involved for the government. So the government needs to decide how many people can get permanent visa in a year so they can financially plan for all those new migrants becoming permanent residents, and if we're going to have enough money to support them while they're here in terms of health and public education as well. People are able to, their kids can have access to public education when you have a permanent visa, all these government benefits. So the budget was announced end of March, and yes, we took a while to be here with you. We published blog posts, we included these numbers on our newsletters, but we wanted to understand as well where the government's going with those numbers. So we are here today to discuss a little bit about these numbers. The total numbers of permanent visas that the government has announced will remain the same, and that hasn't changed even from before the pandemic. So we have 160,000 visas available to be granted this financial year that we are now, and that's going to be the same next year. However, the government already announced that on the other financial year, 23-24, and the next one as well, 24-25, these numbers will be increased because the government understands and acknowledges that migrants are a major, crucial part of the economic recovery from the pandemic. We weren't really hit hard comparing to other economies out there, but the major effect we've been feeling is the lack of skilled workers and now even unskilled workers. So we're desperate for all types of workers, from cleaners to waiters to taxi drivers, bus drivers, up to scientists, IT developers, and so on. And this is a consequence of not having received any temporary arrivals for almost 2 years when the borders were closed from March 2020 to December 2021 for students and workers, but for tourists even, we only opened the borders in February this year. So the major effect employers, Australian employers, are feeling is that we don't have enough people to work in skilled and unskilled positions. So as a recognition of that, the government's not disagreeing with that. They understand and accept that this is a problem, and therefore these numbers are there to support the economy and the workforce. So total numbers will be maintained. However, there's going to be redistribution among all the visa subclasses. So the first thing that the government announced was that there is going to be an increase in places for skilled visas, and that's going to be 30,000 skilled visas added this next financial year. Now, if you come to our webinars, if you read our newsletters, I'm always going on with the same topic. What is a skilled visa? So the skilled migration program includes general skilled migration visas and employer nominated visas. So general skilled migration visas, we're talking about the permanent independent skilled visa 189, which is the most sought after visa Australia has to offer because it's permanent and it's independent. You don't need a job offer, and you don't need a state or a territory nominating you or sponsoring you. Then we have subclass 190 state or territory nominated skilled visa, which is also a permanent visa, but as the name says, you need a state or a territory to nominate you. And we have a provisional, which means temporary visa, subclass 491 regional skilled visa. So these three are general skilled migration visas. They are points tested. So when you hear, I have to score 65 points, that's one of these visas that people are talking about. And these visas are operated under skill select. So you can't just go and apply. I can't, get your papers, prepare an application for you and just lodge it. We need to first submit an expression of interest for you. And once the government, either the federal or a state government, invites you, then you will be able to apply for that visa. So that's one part of the skilled migration program. The other parts are employer-sponsored or nominated visas. So the most famous here is the sponsorship work visa, used to be called 457 for a number of years now. It's TSS 482. There's also a regional sponsorship visa, number 494, and a permanent employer visa, number 186. So when we're talking about employer visas here, we're mainly talking about the 186 visa. So the government has increased the number of employer nominated visas from 22,000 to 30,000 this next financial year, starting in a few months. So there's another 8,000 visas extra there, which is good news. And how does this affect you? If you are applying for one of these visas, your visa will be processed a little bit quicker because there's more places. Now, the biggest jump was for the visa 189 from 6,500, which is a very small number of visas. And this was a decision that the government made when the pandemic started to really reduce those visas. But it had been happening in previous years as well. That went down from 16,000 something to 6,000 when the pandemic hit. Good news, we're going back to pre-pandemic numbers, and this next financial year we're going to be back at 16,500 something. So that's great, but this is still not enough places for things to be back as they were before. And we say that to a lot of people. If your plan involves being invited for the 189 visa, you should have a plan B. And that's when working with a migration agent experienced like us is the best thing for you, because we will look at your chances of being invited and we'll be realistic. If we think you're not going to be invited, we're going to say, look, let's submit your expression of interest, but then let's have a plan B. What else should you be doing? Should we look at a regional visa? Should we be looking at an employer visa? And so on. We're very happy that the numbers are increasing for the next financial year, but it's still not enough for everyone who's waiting for an invitation to be invited. So good news, but you still need a plan B. The subclass 190 state-nominated permanent visa also increased from 11,200 to 20,000 places for next year. So almost 9,000 extra places there, which is great. This means states and territories will be inviting more people to apply. One of the most popular states is New South Wales, and New South Wales invites people constantly. We just had someone invited last week, one of our clients, and it's one of the most solid states and the state that gets the biggest number of places. So if this financial year New South Wales was going really well already, we foresee the next year 190 via nomination by New South Wales and other states will be an even more solid plan. But again, talk to us so we can check if that's the best in your case, not in everyone's case. Subclass 491, the temporary regional provisional visa, is a great visa, even though it's not permanent, because after living and working in regional areas for 3 years, you're able to get a permanent visa without having to involve an employer or even a state at the permanent stage. So a lot of people say, well, I really want a permanent visa. This is a safe visa that will get you there. And by regional areas, we don't mean you're going to have to live in the outback. Regional areas for the purposes of immigration at the moment include the whole country except Sydney, Brisbane, and Melbourne. So, for example, the Gold Coast is a regional area. Adelaide, Perth, the whole state of South Australia, the Northern Territory, Byron Bay, Wollongong, Newcastle are all largish cities where you're still in a regional area. So it's a good thing to consider. So that went up from 11,200 places to 25,000 places. So double. We're very happy to see that happening. And again, the states and territories love this visa because you need to stay with them living there for 3 years. So it's a win-win situation. We saw a reduction on business investor visas. And again, there were changes to these visas in July, so it became harder for someone to qualify for this visa. So we believe that the reduction has to do with this increase. So from 13,500 places, we're going down to 9,500. And that's the redistribution. So there's places being taken from the business investor visa and sent to the skilled migration program, which is great. Global talent visas, a small reduction as well. And we believe that's simply because there's not that many global talents out there. And we say to people, I'm sorry, there's some construction work nearby. It's probably very loud. So we say to people sometimes who contact us and say, I want to apply for the global talent visa. And we look at their circumstances and we say, look, you're a good candidate for a skilled visa, but not for the global talent visa. We're not trying to put you down. It's just that it's not that simple to qualify for this visa. But having said that, it's a very successful program. We have clients from all over the world being invited. And once you are invited, the invitation process is taking a while. But once you're invited and we lodge the visa is being approved. We had one approved yesterday after a month. So it's a great program if you qualify. It's not for everyone. But that's gone down from 15,000 to 8,500. So we believe that it's because there's not that many people applying. And all those places have been moved to the skilled migration program. We also saw a reduction in partner visa places, which is concerning because partner visas took a long time to be approved because of places. There was always a lot of places, but there were always also more people applying than places. So we, for a while there, partner visas were taking 2-3 years sometimes to be processed. And with the pandemic, the government allocated more places to partner visas. Therefore, we saw an expedition in processing times. So from 72,300 last year, we went down to 40,500. Therefore, it's still a lot of places. The government believes that's enough, but we're just worried that's going to slow down processing again. So if you're thinking about applying for a partner visa, apply sooner rather than later, because the sooner you apply, the faster the visa will be approved. But again, contact us. We offer a free assessment for people looking at applying for a partner visa. If you and your partner are here in Australia, we're happy to touch base and see if you qualify before anything. Don't rush into applying if you don't qualify. We have a webinar that I present called 7 Mistakes to Avoid when Applying for a Partner Visa. And one of them is don't rush things, but also don't leave it for the last minute. And if you're looking for a speedy result more than ever, you should look at applying as soon as possible. We saw an increase in numbers for parent visas. So we do a lot of parent visas. For example, our clients become permanent residents and then they decide they want to bring their parents to live in Australia with them. So there's around 3 options, not many options. And also it takes a long time because there's not a lot of places, but we saw an increase in places for the next financial year from 4,500 to 6,000 places. So great. It's, looking good for parents. It's still not enough, but yeah, we're positive. Like I said, increasing skilled visas is the government recognizing that we need skilled workers more than ever. So it's a good thing. Now I'm looking at some questions that we opened. As I said, we got some questions that had nothing to do with visa numbers, but I'll try to answer as many as I can. So someone here is asking about, and I'm gonna try to answer that live. 190 visa in South Australia. So the 190 visa, as I said, is a state and or a territory nominated visa. It is a permanent visa and it is a visa that requires a nomination. So you can't just apply for this visa. You need to be nominated by a state or territory. Every state and territory has their own requirements on top of everything else that the Department of Immigration requires. Now, South Australia has always had a very solid nomination program, and they have been allocated a good number of places. Because remember, last financial year, this current financial year, we only had 11,200 places for this visa for the whole country. So when the budget is announced and we know, okay, there's 11,200 places for visa 190, after that, the government then decides how many places each state and territory will get after that. They have to divide and distribute the places. So South Australia got around 5,000 places for this financial year. And because we are at the end of April, we only have practically 2 months until the end of the financial year. So at the moment, South Australia is kind of running out of places, which doesn't mean they won't invite you, but it's getting closer to the end. And they already, several states and territories have created priority lists where they say, okay, we're running out of places. Who are we going to use these last few places with? And they always decide to look at people who are living in that state or territory and who are working in their nominated occupations. So Tasmania did that. The Northern Territory, we had a nomination from the Northern Territory last week, but for a person who's been living and working there for 3 years. So with the 190 and the 491, the places are increasing for the next financial year, as I was saying, and we then presume that safely that there'll be more places for each state and territory. Therefore, they might make their requirements more flexible and they might invite more people. Now, for the 190 and the 491, normally they use their places up with people who are living and either studying or working here in their states or territories already. So even though New South Wales, Canberra, and South Australia, they all have opened to nominate people from offshore, that requires an invitation from them. So we cannot even apply for state nomination for you if you're outside of Australia. However, this is a very progressive move from these 3 states and territory, in the case of Canberra, because they were the first ones to open for offshore applicants, people outside of Australia, since the pandemic started. So if you are outside of Australia, you have a chance, but it's a small chance because they don't have that many places. Therefore, they will use their places with whoever is already here. And because we're at the end of the financial year, these last 2 months will be used with those people. Now for next year, because there's, as I said, double the places for the 190 and the 491, there will be changes for sure in terms of the policies from the states and territories. They may become more flexible, they may invite more people, they may look at people who are outside of Australia more favorably, but at the moment, it's all to do with people being here. Someone's asking, why are the visas taking so long to be granted? For example, the 190. It's a very good question. The answer is exactly this live presentation today. It's all to do with the numbers. So the government might be running out of numbers of visas to grant. So if you have applied for a 190 and your visa still hasn't been approved, that means you're probably going to be rolled over to the next financial year. Now, as I was saying before, because there's an increase in numbers, it means your visas will be approved quickly. So the visa allocations affect your applications in 2 ways. One, the states and territories will get more places, therefore they may become more flexible and they may nominate more people. But also these planning levels affect how fast your visas are approved. Like I was saying about partner visas, it used to take 2-3 years because we didn't have that many places of visas to be granted every financial year. So because during the pandemic they increased the numbers, we started seeing approvals in 3, 4, 6 months sometimes, when before it used to take 2 years. So yeah. Someone's asking, Queensland is a good place to get the 190 or the 491. Thank you for your question, firstly. Secondly, yes, Queensland is a good place to be nominated for either the 190 or the 491. And the reason, number one, I'll give you is that first, every state and territory, they decide which occupations they want to nominate. Now, remember, they receive their allocation, their visa numbers for the financial year, and then they decide, who do we need? Do we need chefs? Do we need car mechanics? Do we need nurses? Do we need IT professionals? But they also take into consideration the number of visas they can nominate people for. Now, with Queensland, they took a while this financial year to start the program to nominate people. But when they opened in October last year, they opened for all occupations in the visa program. So we're talking about 500-600 occupations. So most occupations are in their list. So that's one good reason for Queensland. Now, the second reason is that they only nominate people who are in Queensland. So At the moment, they're nominating people who graduate from a Queensland university. So if you're thinking about studying a bachelor degree, a master's degree, a PhD, Queensland is a good option because you could be nominated for a 190 permanent visa or a 491 almost permanent visa. And also they nominate people who are working full-time there from 3 to 6 months. Now, at the moment, students can work full-time, and this is another breaking news I want to give you today. International students were allowed in January to work full-time. Again, another sign that the government really understands we need workers in Australia right now, to the point that they said, we're going to relax student visa work permission until April. And so every student and dependent family member of a student visa holder can work unlimited hours. Now, today is the 28th of April, and the government just announced that they are not going to cancel this now. They're going to leave it on until further notice, and they didn't even put an end date to it. So this is huge news. We're going to be posting more about this. But if you're in Queensland working as a student now, maybe you could be applying for state nomination. But if this changes, because it will go back to normal, the good thing about studying in Queensland is that you might finish your course, depending on what you study. You might be granted a graduate visa, and that graduate visa gives you full work rights. And after working for 3 or 6 months in your occupation, you could be nominated by Queensland. Now, so answering your question, yes, Queensland is a good place to get nominated for the 190-491, but you need to have an occupation, you need to have a positive skills assessment, which sometimes requires work experience, and you may have to also, work extra than what you thought you needed to, and that would require a visa with full work rights. But Queensland is a great option. In terms of 190 and 491, Queensland and South Australia at the moment are very good options. Tasmania is also a good option, but Tasmania has closed for the financial year. There's some issues going on there with accommodation. It's a small island. There's a lot of people moving there. So we're, advising people more to go to Queensland or South Australia. Now, if you're not in Australia, or if you are in Australia and you're thinking about, and you are a student, or you're thinking about studying, you can talk to us as well. We have an in-house student agency called Bravo Study, and we can help you plan where it would be better for your occupation. So my answer here is, in general, Queensland is a good state, but it may be that if we look at your circumstances, we might say, no, it's better if you go to Western Australia or to Tasmania, and so on. But stay tuned. We're always doing lives and webinars, and we'll be happy to answer other questions in other topics. But I guess that's it for today in terms of questions. Hope this has been useful and informative. Get in touch with us, please, by email or Instagram. We're happy to have a look at your circumstances, if you're in or outside of Australia. So have a great rest of your day. If you're in Australia, of your night, if you're anywhere else in the world, and thank you for joining us. Bye.